Hey everybody, it's November 10th and it's your episode 206 of At Percussion. And my name is Casey Cangelosi and I've got some co-hosts with me. We've got Ben Charles here
Hi, everybody.
and Karli Viñas here.
Hi, everyone.
And back on the show for his second appearance is Shaun Tilburg. Okay, Shaun, say hi in three, two, one, go.
Howdy.
That was good. Yeah, how's it going, Shaun? How was your concerto? You had this huge concerto.
Oh man, just right out of the bat. It was great. Yeah. Opening weekend, that was like 10 weeks ago, but thanks for asking now.
Yeah, you're welcome. Well, and when this comes out, it'll be another 4 or 5 weeks.
Right.
So, and Ben, you just played a concerto too, right? Didn't you play a big timpani concerto?
Yeah, I played the Doherty Raise the Roof, which I have never considered myself like a timpani specialist, but that piece I feel like I am now.
That's like who you are now.
Yeah, I've given up on all the rest of percussion, timpani only from here on out.
Shaun, what was your concerto? Remind us.
Switch by Andrew Norman. Came out 2017. Colin Curry premiered it.
Mm-hmm.
Is that like a multi-percussion concerto?
Yeah, it's huge. I think there's like 50 plus instruments if you count individual blocks and things like that. There's marimba involved, but it's.
But I have a question. Does it have maraca mallets in it?
No, or I would not have played it.
Yeah, I regret that. I was they were like $80, and I was paranoid I was going to break one the whole time. And if you break one, there's no substitute. So, yeah.
Those were made exclusively for West Side Story, right? I mean, for the little spot in West Side Story where you're supposed to hit the temps with maracas.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This concerto has them, and I feel like there's one other piece that has them. I think it's like always listed on the product description.
Hey, well, let me introduce Matt here. You guys, today's guest has performed with Phoenix Symphony, St. Paul Chamber Orchestra, as well as the Houston Grand Opera and the Hawaii Opera Theater. He's performed with So Percussion and percussion group Cincinnati. So, yeah, wow, Matt's done a whole lot of big name people in and outside of percussion. He's a dedicated proponent of new music and has commissioned and premiered works by David Lang, John Luther Adams, James Stevenson, Martin Brenznick, Thomas Osborne, Paul Lansky, and Lauren Bernofsky. Is that right? Lauren Bernofsky? Is that how you say your name, Matt?
Yes, that's right.
Wow. So thanks for coming on the show. And how's it going, Matt?
Thanks for having me. It's going good.
Yeah, this is Matthew McClung, everyone. And have you played a concerto recently? Apparently, that's what everyone said.
Yeah. Actually, the Paul Lansky thing happened a couple of years ago. Paul Lansky wrote a concerto for me called Five Views of an Unfamiliar Tune. And I played it with the Chamber Orchestra September ago.
Okay. Let's
little concerto contribution to this conversation.
Right. Good. Thanks. Ben, I think you're going to say something.
Yeah, well, I now I'm sidetracked. I want to talk about Paul Lansky because I saw your interview with him. But I was going to ask, maybe we can come back around to that. But I was going to ask Matt, just to sort of like start out. I know you've had a pretty major life change recently. You were teaching at Texas A&M Corpus Christi, which our buddy Ksenia just took over that position. And I was wondering if you'd be willing to talk about what inspired you to give up that sort of coveted university position and what your next steps are.
Right. Well, I got married to a violinist in the St. Paul Chamber Orchestra. And, we just kind of talked about it, and it was easier for me to move than for her to move. There was more for me to do as a freelance teacher / percussionist in the Twin Cities than there would be for a violinist like her in Corpus Christi, Texas. I grew up in the Midwest. I grew up outside of Chicago, and my family members are all sort of getting older, and it's a little easier if I'm a little bit closer to them and can come in for funny little, whether it's medical stuff or just reprogramming the Wi-Fi for them. So in the fall of my 12th year at Texas A&M Corpus, I gave my notice, and I wanted to make sure that they had plenty of time to find a quality replacement and somebody that would take the program to the next level. And it seems by all appearances that Ben is going to be that person. I was fortunate enough to meet the finalists, and everybody who came in for that job was really great and super qualified and nice and smart. And but Ksenia was she sort of came out on top.
Yeah.
I hear she's doing amazing stuff.
Yeah, great. I was just going to say congratulations on the decision. I think it's so sad when we have to do your hair. It's so common, like long distance marriages because of these, supposed coveted jobs or whatever. But I really am of the feeling like, man, screw that. Just be together. That's such a better thing to have. The jobs are cool, but they're not that cool, I don't think.
Right. I mean, I had a great time at my job. There were many great things about it, but I just kind of decided that I didn't want to keep my job out of fear that there would never be another job ever if I move someplace else. And I mean, there's certainly, that kind of hangs over the head a little bit because it's a super tight market. It's difficult. When you throw your application in, and every year there's 100 people who are, super monstrous marimba virtuosos pumping out of all these conservatories with doctorates, and they're thrown into the same job pool we're all in. So I get that it's competitive and that getting a job like that is rare, but again, fear is not a great motivator when it comes to life decisions.
Yeah, right. Do you think you'll ever go back to it? Do you think you'll ever do that? Go in for jobs in the area or anything? Like, say, if University of Minnesota, Fernando Meza retires in the next decade or something. I don't know if he will that soon, but suppose hypothetically.
Yeah, sure. I'd throw my hat in the ring, and I'm happy to keep teaching, but there was always kind of a tension between my teaching career and my performing career. I'm sure some of you know exactly what I'm talking about, but you get called away to do stuff, and you can take so many gigs before your students start wondering how many times you're going to move their lesson and have them rehearse without you and all this stuff. Eventually, you have to show up for your full-time day job. And so I always had a certain amount of tension there, especially since I was in Corpus Christi, which doesn't necessarily have a thriving music scene and isn't a big orchestra town. And I was going, I was driving to San Antonio and driving to Houston to play in orchestras, and it was taking a lot of toll.
Yeah.
And so it's been kind of interesting that all just suddenly dropped away, and now when the phone rings, I can take it and I don't have to worry about having to reschedule a bunch of lessons and stuff.
Yeah, sure.
As you can imagine.
Yeah. Well, Oliver Molina, I think related to this, asks a pretty broad question, but how have you crafted your career to perform with so many ensembles and musicians? Not sure where you'd want to take that, but love to hear it.
Well, first of all, I certainly don't think of my career as something that I have crafted. It's just kind of, a lot of stuff has just kind of happened, and it's been super fun stuff. And I'm happy that it's all happened, but I don't know how much of this stuff is in whatever version of my bio you guys have seen, but my undergraduate degree is in engineering. And at some point I decided before I finished that degree that I would try and go back and get a music degree. Always with the caveat that, well, I can always go back and do engineering, but I don't want to regret not being a musician. I don't want to wake up when I'm 40 and, have that experience of, geez, maybe I should have tried to whatever.
Music just sounded so much more profitable, I'm sure.
Right. Obviously, that's where mad stacks come in. Once you master the triangle, pretty much the world is your oyster. But after I kind of made that decision to follow a musical path, I have always felt very lucky to have any musical experience. You know, at that time, before I knew that I was going to land a full-time job, I was thinking, well, this could be my last orchestra gig. I might not get a chance to play this piece ever again, that kind of stuff. And I was always, and if you've ever been an engineering student, you'll know how much joy you can get from just playing a woodblock part in an orchestra concert. I mean, there's just something about being in that shared musical experience that if you spend several hours a day writing down equations off a blackboard, you can really get pleasure from what would seem like simple musical experiences. Because of that, I tend to get excited and say yes when somebody offers me an opportunity. And I try and play music with my friends whenever I get the chance, whether it's a fantastic financial or career decision or not. I tend to gravitate towards just hanging out with my pals and doing something musical. Case in point, I have enjoyed going and playing with Shaun in his orchestra in Phoenix, and before that in his orchestra in Hong Kong. And there are other people that I've interacted with that I've enjoyed. When the phone rings, if I can do it, I take it. And it's been like, that's where my joy comes from. So that's, I guess, why the long list of ensembles. Plus, I don't have kids. I think if I had kids, I'd have to say no a lot more, but I can, if my schedule allows, I can hop on a plane.
Gotcha. Yeah, I mean, I was going to just sort of add to the conversation, just like one sentence here. And it's just, I think a lot of people read a bio and they wonder, how did that person play? How did they craft that and get, that gig? And it's like, you just follow what you like. You just follow what you're doing. And it's, yeah, you can trace the steps backward to how you played with Houston Symphony or, Phoenix or whatever. But yeah, you just follow something.
Yeah, I'm a rat in a maze. I smell cheese and I turn right or I go straight, or yeah, that's me.
Well, and the three of us, Matt, Shaun, and myself, we all studied, I guess, at separate times at Rice University under Richard Brown. And people often talk about Richard Brown. I mean, he's got so many connections all around Houston, New York City, and Philadelphia. And he's one of the major contractors for musicians, not just percussionists, but musicians all over those areas. I guess question for both Shaun and Matt: was there stepping help from Mr. Brown?
Take it, Shaun.
I knew you were going to say that. Off and on, yeah.
Yeah.
Richard is very supportive of his students and will definitely try to help you get a foot in the door if he's able to.
Yeah, and I felt that too.
He was kind of good about using. He would bring us in for his local gigs, and also give us opportunities like moving his gear and taking trucks around. Which if you need cash, he would pay you. So
yeah.
I mean, he was pretty good about those things. He's had a couple people play with the Grand Tetons and the Houston Grand Opera occasionally, and yeah.
Well, I think it's important to ask because I think some people look at when they're picking teachers, they often go after well, what's this person going to do for me, not what am I going to learn from this person. I think we all learned a ton from him probably in our own ways, and of course he's got a great track record of successful students, but it's just good to get a clear picture. It's like that, all his connections is not the best thing about him. I guess is a nice way to say it. Yeah. Karli, I think you have something regarding freelancing or something?
Yeah, something like that. As we're talking about Matt's recent transitions, working, and freelancing is something that's common. Like all of us at some point, even if you have a full-time job, you're going to do some freelance work. So I've been putting some ideas together for an article I'm thinking about writing on freelancing, and I wanted to share with you all some of the thoughts that have been on my mind, relating to not just surviving but also thriving with freelance work as a musician, musically, of course, financially, and then personally, like talking about quality of life, those kinds of things. Because again, we all find ourselves in the position of being offered or at some point taking some freelance work, whether it's part time or full time. So I'll spare you the classic freelancing advice, which is, of course, always be early, be prepared, be professional, and be friendly, be nice, because that's a given. We all know that we're that way all the time when we're working. So here's some other food for thought and some tips. And the first one that's on my mind a lot, especially lately, is balance. I think this is one of the toughest ones for all musicians, but especially if you're freelancing a lot or if freelancing is a core of your work because you're only paid for the hours or the services that you agree to work. It's really hard sometimes to prioritize your time off, time to recharge, time to have creative ideas and work on projects, take care of yourself, but it's so important. So my advice, and something I need to work on following a little bit more, is to manage your own schedule like you would manage the schedule of like somebody that you really care about, like close friend or family member. Like you would probably not say, yeah, sure, I'll teach 14 or 15 hours straight without hardly any time for a break. Or maybe you want to schedule like an 8 a.m. lesson after, a really long concert far away that you're going to get home kind of late after. So that's a hard one because, as teachers and I think as players, like we give so much of our time and we need to make sure we take some of that for ourselves too. Um, another piece of advice for freelancing, I think, is to make yourself indispensable in the sense of figure out what it is that you have to offer that nobody else can, or maybe that you can offer in a really specific way. And I won't get too much more detailed than that because this is going to mean something different for everybody else. But find your role and your voice naturally. Third piece of advice is that everything will always ebb and flow. There's going to be really busy times. There's going to be slower times. And here in South Florida, the busy time is pretty much September, October through like the end of the concert season really is April, early May. And then the summer is slow. And the first couple summers I spent down here, I thought like it's stressful. You just think like, well, like, what am I doing with my life? Why am I
There is
free? And
nothing in the summer in South Florida.
it's slow. At best, we get like little movie concerts or something, but it's tough. People aren't even used to going to concerts down here in the summer. And the first couple of years I felt some anxiety, like, am I going to get work in the fall? Are things going to work out? And it does. Everything ebbs and flows, and it's seasonal. Some years are better than others, but what I always tell my students is that if you're working consistently, and with integrity and pointing your efforts in kind of strategic directions, things are going to work out. Things are going to be okay. And I really believe that. So I guess have patience with the ebbs and flows and the busy times and the slow times because they have their value and we need to appreciate them all. Finally, I wanted to share with you. This is an excerpt, a little paragraph from the poem Desiderata by Max Ehrmann. Is anyone familiar with that?
No.
Wow, cool. That's awesome. This is one of my favorite poems, and you shall look up the full text later. But this one, I think, speaks specifically to some elements of like combating this anxiety and things that we feel as musicians, but especially as freelancing. So here it is. This is from Max Ehrmann's Desiderata. If you compare yourself with others, you may become vain or bitter, for always there will be greater and lesser persons than yourself. Enjoy your achievements as well as your plans. Keep interested in your own career, however humble. It is a real possession in the changing fortunes of time. So I like this excerpt, and there's some other really nice things in there because we all I think have this tendency of comparing ourselves and our playing and our careers, and who played this. Like you check videos and we compare ourselves to others all the time, and it's usually not constructive. Sometimes it's good to kind of keep you on track, like how am I doing compared to my peers, but it can be really destructive to us in a lot of ways, I think. Um, and then the line "enjoy your achievements as well as your plans" is really important, because of course celebrate. You get a new job, you get a great gig, you have a great performance. Enjoy that and celebrate that. But also, we always have to keep looking forward and thinking, what's next? Where am I going next? We can't rest on our laurels. Casey, I think you have something.
Yeah, well, thanks for that, Carla. I was just to say, Shaun and I are always comparing each other. It's not healthy. Like, he sends me pictures of what he's practicing. He's like, "Look at this rep I'm working on," and then he asks me questions about finale because he's like, "I've got this commission. Can you help me with this question I have or whatever?" I was gonna say, how do you?
That's actually true.
That part is true. Yeah.
So my
You're a
question is, who has
finale
faster
guru.
hands, Casey or Shaun?
Oh, well, yeah. Well, Shaun, you can answer that.
What was that?
Who has faster hands?
Casey does.
Yeah, I mean, it's fine. It's Shaun.
Yeah,
I mean, come on.
I
I
think
hate
that's
to
the
say
end of the
that.
episode then.
Now, he also has less accurate hands, so I'll put that on him.
But what if I played slower?
I mean, you never do, so it's a pointless.
Ah, you got me. Yeah, you got me. You win. You win. So about
what if you
this,
played with
about
the
this.
lights on? I don't know. These are questions we'll never get the answers to.
So this is what you're saying is cool, Karli, and I was gonna say it's how helping students with this I think is so hard because you're right, it's not healthy and it's difficult, and one, I guess it's not healthy to a point. I mean, you probably some healthy competition keeps you growing and gives you benchmarks of where to go and places to grow and stuff like that. But it's almost I've of course heard this a lot, and I'm not trying to criticize the advice. I think it's good advice, but I think when we say, don't be one of those people that compares yourself, be one of those people that recognizes everyone has strengths and weaknesses, and that's a good thing. You're making another person for them to compare themselves with. This is a new thought. It just came to mind, but so now they're comparing themselves to the person who isn't bothered by these things. And when you're developing and you're young, it's so hard to turn off that comparison of, oh man, Shaun Tilburg's so good at snare drum and Matt McClung played with so percussion and I haven't played with anybody. It's hard to turn that off. But then we're also having to compare to, hey, you also like should be one of those people who sees the bigger picture and doesn't care. So I don't know, any thoughts on like, is there a happy medium,
One thing I was going to say, don't ever compare yourself to someone's bio, because if their bio says that they performed with Mariah Carey or something, like they weren't. That doesn't mean they were like Mariah Carey's drummer. They probably played like a Glock part in like an orchestra gig that like Mariah, like it doesn't mean that you were Mariah Carey's personal choice. Like
It might though.
Like I
It
can
might.
with Jennifer Lopez and Pitbull, but truth be told, when we played, it was actually we were like on live TV without microphones, so we were just playing along to a track. So,
But if I just played some Shaker on Mariah Carey, I'd have that in my bio. That's key.
I mean, yeah, exactly. But yeah, I mean, the point is like reading someone's bio, like like it doesn't necessarily mean what it sounds like, and like how many people played with Frank Sinatra at some point, like. Yeah, Emil Richards was his vibraphone player, but how many people had a gig at some point? It's yeah, I don't know.
Well,
you see,
the other thing is everybody.
Don't put that in your bio. It's putting in your bio, like yeah, it is true, but like don't compare other people's bios.
But I guess what I'm trying to say is we're giving them another thing to try not to compare to. Like, hey, don't try to size yourself up in snare drum and percussion and marimba, and it's like there's already so many things, and then we're making a new one called like, hey, don't be one of those people that's always comparing. Try to not be that. And it's a new category of like, oh, am I doing that? I need to not do that. I wish I could be more like Ben, who just doesn't care. I want to hear from Karli though, because I'm like kind of picking a fight with her.
Gosh, there's so much to respond to. I guess I'll say, I think, of course, it's good to have an idea of where you are compared to your peers and compared to people, especially if you're kind of a big fish in a small pond kind of kind of person or in that kind of situation, it's so good to open your eyes and see like what else is going on out there. But I guess just channeling it in the right way where it's not like, oh man, everybody is doing amazing things and I'm terrible, I don't have anything. But like, wow, everybody's doing amazing things and this gives me an idea about what I can do, or this is so cool, I'm happy for them. What's next for me? I think that's the challenge, and it's something that I think happens more with social media. And I mean, you like most of us have tons of percussionists and musicians in our feeds, and you just scroll through and you see like, oh, everybody's doing this stuff, but they're not posting like when they're messing up in the practice room. They're posting like, oh, this was a really great run of this, right? You're only online, you're only posting publicly. And the same goes for things in your personal life. Like you're only posting like, oh, so happy, I had a great day, I'm happy in my, whatever. You're posting like the best parts of your life and the best parts of your playing, and I think that's part of what makes it unhealthy too, or can make it unhealthy.
Yeah, no, that's great. And I guess you're kind of helping me clarify my thought. And I guess it is just simply that, like, if you're advising a student on this, it's a pretty nuanced opinion. It's not just cut and dry, like, hey, stay out of that, don't compare yourself. Yeah, but yeah, no, that's good.
So my only thought on this comes after a couple of weeks of having, I think we had 6, 7, and then 8 percussionists. So I've had a lot of new and lesser experienced and younger subs over the past month. And I've got a lot more coming. And then, over my 12 years of being a principal in Hong Kong and here, I've had a lot of players like Dr. McClung here, and a number of my friends, and including my former teacher, Ted Ackatz, and people that have extensive experience. And I can say kind of the main thing coming from like the position of me, of the guy that you want to like hire you again, concerning an orchestra gig, would be, there's a delicate balance of like being eager and wanting to be there and being positive, and then also just having a very nervous energy and shifting around and feeling sort of scared and all of those things. So whatever you think about, as being a student, and we all went through that, I think the main thing is just be prepared and like be cool and just like do your job. And if they do ask you to do something, then that's like the time to be like, oh yeah, do you like the mallet? Should I do this thing? But don't try to be that person that is, it's like the teacher's pet syndrome, It's like we're all trying to do our job on the stage, and the best thing you can do is kind of focus on your part and try to be relaxed about it, if at all possible.
Yeah. So you just hire your buddies as subs, is what I'm getting.
I tend to hire my buddies because my buddies have a lot of experience, and I know that they can play. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Sounds shady.
No, I mean, I don't just hire my buddies, as you can probably imagine. I mean, this week we had 8 people, so there were 5 guys that normally, don't play with us.
Yeah, I will say, I mean, with anything, there's like a college teaching job, how many finalists you get, like there's plenty of people qualified to do a job at a very high level. Do you that person again? And yeah, I mean, we've all done gigs with people that we would rather not see again.
For all kinds of reasons.
Yeah. And we've all done gigs with people that can't play their parts, and that's also, you would never hire that person again either, obviously.
Yeah.
Matt, say something.
When Karli was talking about like collecting her thoughts about freelancing, I at some point I did that, and gave an hour presentation to my kids probably once every 2 years about just sort of like a young percussionist guide to freelancing. And a lot of what we talked about is echoed in what you guys were saying. But first of all, to Shaun's point, I'm a principal percussionist in a couple of smaller organizations, for River Oaks Chamber Orchestra in Houston and for the Glimmerglass Opera Festival in Cooperstown, New York, over the summers, which is what you do when you live in Texas or Florida and you need to get the heck out of there.
Or Arizona.
Or Arizona. You go to upstate New York. But, sometimes I have to make hiring decisions about what subs we're going to bring in. And I would frequently tell my kids, like there's I'm not going to bring you in to play snare drum on Scheherazade. That's not what you're going to get hired to do as a sub. You're going to play triangle, and you're going to, as Shaun said, you're going to try and just sort of be there, know your stuff, and be cool. And you're basically, I'm hiring people who are going to solve problems for me instead of cause problems for me. If there's, somebody who like wants to bug the conductor about stuff, or is, sort of got a lot of nervous energy about equipment, or just there's all kinds of things that you can do to sort of bring a weird energy to the table. But
So like, if you hired Shaun and to play triangle, but then he like took a score he wrote and took it up to the conductor, it was like, hey, will you check this out? That's a bad move.
And you say if, but of course, that has happened on many occasions.
He's done it.
Hire Shaun anymore.
It's funny because my question was going to be, it's like if you hired Casey to play triangle, but instead he showed up and was holding a snare drum in one hand, running around the stage playing bolero with one hand.
Oh, it'd be cool.
People around the stage giggling. That would probably be a negative.
Yeah, I'm gonna edit that out. Yeah, that's not going in.
Man.
Hey, so I want to hear about this new timpani book. I heard you're working on one.
Yeah, so this came about from really two different angles. One of them was I was always writing out exercises for my students to do because so many books, at least for my taste, there's a lot of books, timpani books out there that have maybe a few pages early on of basic exercises, to the point of, I think the Goodman shows like that 1 whole note equals 2 half notes equals 4, literally starts with that. And then it's got 2 pages of exercises, and then suddenly you're playing etudes and Beethoven 7. And for me, I just needed something, I needed exercises for my kids to come in and play, because they could, some of them could play just fine, but they just played timpani like you play snare drum, and they didn't have a good sense of the drums. And I was just trying to get them to focus on their strokes. And so I was just, kind of looking at them and deciding what they needed and writing it out for them. And I just got sick of it. And I thought maybe I should collect these and publish them. And the other thing was when my wife started playing with the SPCO a couple of years ago, it was after the very talented and dazzling Michael Israelovich had left. And so SPCO was bringing in subs for basically their whole season, a few weeks at a time. And I found myself in a position where I was going to be playing timpani. She put my name in, and they took a look at my resume, and I'm not a timpani specialist necessarily. And so I was like, I got to get my timpani chops back in order. These are sort of, a lot of these concerts are broadcast or recorded for archival purposes and then put out on their whatever. And I wanted to do a good job, and I wanted to give myself like an exercise regimen just so I could work my timpani chops back up. And I felt like rather than going back and playing the Carter March a bunch of times and Tchaik 4, it would have been nice to have some version of stick control or something, or timpani. And I didn't think that, if that book existed, I didn't know about it. And so I approached Shaun, and I was like, I got a couple of exercises that I've written out, and what do you think of that? And he gave me basically some encouragement and said, yeah, why don't you pursue this? And ever since that happened, I started buying as many timpani books as I could to see what was actually out there. And there are a couple of books that are sort of useful and come a little bit closer to what I was looking for. But fortunately, none of them, I didn't feel like I was duplicating anything that was already out there. So anyway, an exercise regimen for myself, plus I was tired of writing out crap for my students all the time.
Sure.
Equals, I wrote a timpani book, and that's basically what it was for.
Yeah, that sounds so great. I like Shaun's idea with Shaun. I can't remember, what's your snare drum book called again?
The regimen.
The regimen, yeah. And
The regime.
yeah, I think that's
Yeah.
the French version. Um, yeah, and having some sort of technical thing, and like Matt, hearing you say this, just like so much makes me think about, like, I am in total agreement with you that we really don't actually have, I hate to say it, but that many great timpani texts available in the way that we have like method of movement from marimba. And I think I've mentioned this before on the podcast, but it's so funny to me hearing either like high school all region auditions or students coming to audition or just freshmen. There are so many students that can play snare drum so well, and there are so many students that can play marimba so well. And I have, honest to God, not a single time have I ever seen a student that can produce a halfway decent tone on timpani without, without instruction. And it's not, I think it's not actually all that hard to do. It's just there's no great instruction for it, and generally high schoolers are specialists on snare drum and or marimba, but I haven't really met any high school timpanists.
Yeah, when Matt was talking to me about the book, I knew it would be great because he's a very smart guy and has a lot of experience teaching and all of those good things. But what I really liked was how he was pitching it and what he had already kind of come up with, and it was really logical, step by step. Like, what are the challenges of timpani playing? Tuning, getting across the drums, being equal, starting with either hand, rolls onto odd hands, all those things. And he broke them into chapters and then had specific exercises for it, like exactly like we should have done 45 years ago, or whatever. And it just, as far as I know, I hadn't seen it that clearly and that simply either. And like I said, this past week we had 8 guys. We had 3 of them are actually 2 are high school band director percussionists, and 1 is a college professor. And I just showed them this book, and they were like, yeah, it's obviously this is what we need. It's separated. It's really easy. Like, and I've had even DMA students, which I'm sure, Casey, that those of us that teach enough, I've even had DMA students that really don't know how to attack like tuning. They know that they're bad at it, and they know they need to work on it. And I just sort of make something up on the fly, like, well, set up a chord and then change it and do major and minor. But it's just really nice to have like actual reference material that you can say, look, here's like a thing, go do this.
It's so funny hearing Shaun talk about that, because I was actually teaching a lesson this week, and I was saying it's so often that there's some sort of breakthrough that sounds significant, but then it needs to be followed by something else. Like Laurel reported a long time ago about the first music recordings. We figured out how to record music, but we couldn't play it back. And the recording is kind of worthless without playback. And the analogy I made is like, okay, Mr. Tilburg, we have your test results in, and you have cancer. All right, see you next week. It's like, no, so hold on, I need to know what's the, it's great you got the diagnosis, but we need somewhere to go from there. But I wanted to ask, I guess Matt in particular, since you just wrote the book, one thing that I find a lot is my first sort of timpani teachers were all about French grip. And I respect that style of playing so much, but to me, my wrists just don't move that way. And so I had to figure out another technique. And Matt Strauss really does not use like the pure French grip technique, and some lessons with him really informed what I ended up taking away. But Matt, in your book, do you talk about like selecting a technique that works for you? And I guess it's also not that this would be in your book, but it has to do with four mallet playing too. With some people play, Stevens grip when it really doesn't work in their hands, and Burton grip would be so much better.
Yeah, we talked about this quite a bit, and my aim was to make a book that transcended different sort of technical approaches, which is to say anybody with any technique still needs to do 8 on a hand, still needs to know how to cross versus how to shift.
And as I tell the students, like the drum doesn't know how you're holding the stick. It just knows what information it's receiving. Yeah.
There's so many people out there who can make a beautiful sound out of a drum in a variety of ways. And it's also, when I gave out this book to different readers to give me some feedback. And first of all, I was really psyched about everybody I talked to was like, oh yeah, we need a book like that. We don't have one. And then after they read it, the first the first response tended to be positive and, good job or whatever. And then the second thing they said is, here's what pissed me off about your book. Because anytime I opened the can of worms of talking about just minor, I would say lift, or I would say, play through the head, or I would say anything having to do with any sort of specific technical aspect of pulling the sound out of the drum. Whenever I went into that territory, somebody somewhere was like, no. And, it was different things from different readers. So I think my earliest reader was probably, besides Shaun, of course, would have been Doug Perkins. And, he gave me a ton of thoughtful feedback about it. And, he said, I think, I can't even remember the phrase I used, but I used some phrase to describe coming off the drum head. And he said, yes, I love this. And then a subsequent reader was like, you can't say that. You're going to piss off 40% of all. So eventually, I talked to enough people and just sort of extracted as much of that detail as I could, so that what we have left, similar to stick control, if you're playing traditional or you're playing match, you can go to stick control, and that stuff needs to be worked on. And same, I think, with method of movement, even though it's obviously specific to one person's idea of technique. If you want, you can skip over that early section of the book, and it's got a couple hundred exercises that would work curtain grip.
Well, yeah, and I mean, Lee talks about how the book is not about the grip; it's about the method of moving around the instrument. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. No. So we worked really hard on. There was a lot of back and forth and edited versions of it, so that anybody, whether you're French or German or you're kind of a Strauss American style, whatever you do, I tried to keep my advice to a minimum, and just here's 30 exercises you can do to address this problem. Next chapter.
Very cool. So I've heard people ask off and on over the years that they've got some piece or they've written some book and they want to know how to get it out there. They want to know how to get it published. What's your plan once it's all done and complete? And are you going to publish it yourself, or is Shaun going to publish it? What's the plan? And how'd you come up with that plan?
Shaun's going to publish it. By the way, I don't think we've mentioned the title. It's called The Fundamental Timpanist. I should probably be saying that more often in my daily comments.
Is fun going to be in all caps?
Yeah, I put the fungus in fun. Wait, that's not right.
The fungus in fun.
It's going to be mental.
Mental. Yeah. You got to think about this stuff.
Shaun sent me a PDF. Does he send me? I think Shaun sent me a PDF of his book before he published it. And that sort of awakened something in my brain of like, oh, geez, we're a bunch of meathead percussionists, but we could also endeavor to write something and then get it published. And as anybody who's seen the book knows, it's a great addition to the sort of snare drum technical repertoire that we have. And so Shaun was the first person I went to, and I said, would you be willing to publish this if I write it? And so fortunately he agreed, and we've had a lot of back and forth since then. And it's probably, what are we, a couple of weeks from having a physical book?
I think we're actually probably 3 days from having physical books. Yeah. Yeah, it's at the printer. We went back and forth. The quality's all up. It's ready to go.
Who's the printer? Is it FedEx, Shaun?
No, I think you use Staples. Is that right, Casey?
I mean, do what you got to do sometimes, but yeah.
No, I have a local printer. Depends on the job, but for books, with color cover and nice binding and all of that, yeah.
When can we see it on the Shaun Tilburg RS Publishers RS website?
Yeah, that's the official name of my publication company. Pocket Publications.
Oh.
That would be, I don't know, basically when Matt's ready to give the go-ahead, but I think it's going to come in by the end of this coming week.
Cool.
So
very cool. Well, Karli, I think the episode's flying by, so I think you're going to take us to a Facebook question that's a different topic. But yeah, that's exciting, Shaun. Thanks for doing that, Matt. I can't wait to see it.
Yeah, it's very
Seriousness.
exciting.
We'll get you a
So
cupcake, Casey.
we have a question from listener Nicole Kotke Collingborn, and she just writes, "Need to know more about the Awe tribe." So Matt, I read that you took some time and you studied in West Africa and Ghana and studied Awe drumming. So we'd love to hear about your experiences.
I did. I wound up writing my dissertation on the 5 weeks that I spent in Bolivia studying with the Awe tribe. You know, it was what you think it was. You know, I was in a little West African village with no running water and no electricity for 5 weeks. And when they say we were using sticks to hit the drums, like we were using sticks to hit the drums. Like at some point I broke a stick and somebody walked, 10 feet into the yard and just kind of like this, and then picked up a stick and broke it off to the appropriate length. And that's how it was. And, I lost like 30 pounds from the West African diet, which is, as careful as you are about what you eat, suddenly everything inside you is going to want out. So, we had experiences like that. I had experiences like, I know what a West African outhouse looks like at midnight, and it's cockroaches do not scatter; they just look at you. When you
But it's probably not as bad as Houston.
yeah, exactly. They're not any bigger than Houston cockroaches.
This is probably comparable.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah,
Musically, it was really fun for me because when I was young, I learned a lot of stuff by ear. I'm still to this day, I'm much more of an auditory learner than I am like a sight reader, for instance. So everything was handled by rote. They would play me a rhythm, and I would play it back to them, and then we just built the repertoire that I learned from that. I learned it was group drumming, so I learned every part one at a time. Once I mastered the bell pattern, I gave somebody else the bell, and I would move over one chair, and I would learn the kagang part, and then to the kiddie. I think quite a few people have been through this program by now. It's it's fairly popular to go over there, and if people know, just a couple of things about African drumming, a lot of that has come from this. One of the most famous African proponents of African drumming was Godwin Agbeli, who lived in this village, and he and his family taught many outsiders the music of the Ewe tribe. If you look in a general ethnomusicological textbook, and they want to talk about African music, eventually there's gonna be a chapter about West African drumming, and most likely they're going to talk about music of the Ewe. If you only know 1812 overture, if that's the only thing you know about classical music, Ewe drumming is sort of the 1812. Yeah, I was there for 5 weeks. It was hot, and but I came back with a really fun dissertation. I had an amazing experience. I brought back a bunch of fun drums with me.
Do you still own all of those drums?
I do. Yeah, they're sitting. Since I don't have a practice studio yet in the Twin Cities. I'm beating down doors trying to find a place to put all my gear. But right now, my Awe drums are in a public storage facility off Highway 280. St. Paul in Minneapolis. So yeah.
Hey, look at that.
Hey.
Wow.
Wow.
that looks great.
So pretty.
Yeah.
So you said 3 days, and then you just have
Well,
one.
this is a proof. I like to check the work before. Unlike you, Casey.
That's a FedEx proof.
There are no mistakes.
Uh-huh.
You know what I mean?
When you're selling as much as I am, you don't have time for proofs. You just how about that?
All right.
Yeah. It's getting
Well,
really stupid. Hey, so do you use A-Way drumming in teaching? And I guess kind of classic question. So, you went to Ghana and you really learned this style and this technique and this culture. And I guess kind of the natural follow-up question is like, great. So how does it benefit you and your students? And how do you implement it into someone who has a curriculum with you, but can't get over to Ghana and do it as extensively as you did?
Well, one of the things I wanted to achieve with my dissertation document was transcriptions of the pieces I learned that could be uh, purchased by any percussion ensemble, and they could just sort of open it up out of the box, and it explains, first of all, about instrumentation, like this is meant to be played on this kind of bell, but if you don't have that, two differently pitched cowbells will suffice. And then this drum looks like this, it sounds like this, and if you don't have it, you can use a kick drum put on two chairs or what have you. It's sort of like if your percussion ensemble has traditional, Western classical instruments and wants to do something generally, kind of African and fun, and it's got a groove and it's exciting, and you can. That was my plan. Was people can have this document and pop it open, and there you go. It gets complicated, of course, because there's, if you were to write out every single, it's so pattern based that you can't write everything out. You have to sort of figure out a way to say, okay, you're going to do this for a bunch of times, and when this guy signals this, then you go to this. When this drum plays this pattern, then it's time to switch to your second pattern. And when you hear this, you lock in, and there's a certain amount of explanation that has to happen for stuff like that. And then there's also a big, a lot of our percussion ensemble pieces we're trying to give everybody something to do. But it's just not that way with the way this music is structured. Somebody's going to play the bell, and that person is super important and can't fall asleep, but they're going to play one measure 900 times the end. And you got to reckon with that. So I did several times. We would put on a percussion ensemble. I did have my students at A&M perform Wahoo or Inca or something fun. Yeah, and in terms of how it informed my teaching, I don't know. That's a tough. How does an experience? It's hard to put into words how that experience kind of changes you. I thought a lot about one of the other topics of my dissertation that I covered. Really, the thrust of it was how does that work to be a Western trained musician, and what are the differences when you go over into basically a folk, if you want to call it a folk music tradition. How does that work? Because they teach differently. There's nothing written down. They don't really like it when you record. They don't really like it when you're scribbling notes at the time. They don't have any notes to give you. They're not really flexible in terms of, they're flexible in some ways and inflexible in others. And how does that translate? What strategies can one use to get through that experience? Because a lot of people, I didn't realize this, but a lot of people go over there and do that and give up and come back. Like it's a hard existence to be there and have somebody like I was the one student and there were 6 people there whose job it was to teach me, and we went 4 hours a day every day. And again, there's no running water, there's no electricity, it's hot, and everybody's just cramming information into your brain. And I was just trying to keep up, and you feel stupid all the time because there's 6-year-olds walking around this village with more knowledge of their music than I have, and everybody's correcting you, and I'm just trying to keep afloat. And at some point, they said to me, 4 weeks in or something, they were like, you're really good. You don't complain. Like that was the meter of success. Was that I think a lot of people get there and they're like, this is a very difficult experience. It may have changed. I mean, I was there 17 years ago, so I'm sure everybody's experience varies somewhat, and it depends on where you go and who you study with. But
Wow, very cool.
it made me think of a lot about just how we transmit information and get it from the person who's got it.
Yeah, sure.
I just want to add that I can't remember exactly what it was, but Valerie Naranjo had a story like that too. Where
She was, when I was there, we hung out.
Actually, yeah, there you go.
Well, go ahead.
No, I was going to say I can't remember the story, but yeah, check out Valerie's episode as well for more information on that sort of.
Well, and we've had Nani Egbelly on the show.
Oh, no kidding.
And yeah, and we've also had two guys from the Dargaro Music Center on the show, way back when. But hey, so I need to move on because we're about out of time, and I want to tell you guys what happened today in music history. I've been doing these quick little trivia segments, and we're releasing. We're so far ahead. We're releasing on December 5th, so we should all be talking about what we saw at PASIC and what our favorite thing was at PASIC, but actually PASIC hasn't happened yet, and we're releasing well after PASIC. So anyway, but kind of depressing day in history. A lot of people died. Dave Brubeck died, one day before his 92nd birthday, so he died on December 5th. Claude Monet died at age 86 on December 5th. Stockhausen died today. And freaking Mozart died today. So I thought that was pretty amazing that all those people died today. However, Osvaldo Goliath was born. So that makes up for it.
That's something.
And Stockhausen and Mozart. That's interesting.
I know. And so they all share a death date. It's pretty crazy. And also Concerto for Percussion and Chamber Orchestra by Mio was performed for the first time in Paris. So that also happened today. So pretty eventful series of deaths on December 5th.
What year was the Mio Concerto premiered?
Let's see, 1930.
Cool.
I was going to guess 37.
Ooh, nice job.
That could have been the quiz.
He was
that might have been his marimba concerto. I could be wrong though.
There's a Mio marimba concerto?
Yeah, marimba and vibraphone, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and he actually didn't think that people would play it, so he wrote a version for piano as well, which ironically the marimba version probably gets played a whole lot more.
Oh, funny. When I was reading a little bit, I learned that fun fact: Dave Brubeck, like his drummer Joe Morello, his lack of good eyesight shaped his career in quite a way. And Dave Brubeck had a really hard time reading sheet music because his eyes were bad, just like his drummer Joe Morello had a terrible, difficult time seeing conductors. And the story, I guess, is George Lawrence Stone, who wrote Stick Control and Accents and Rebounds, said, you should probably play drum set to student Joe Morello because I don't think you'll be able to see a conductor very well. And so it's just cool that their eyesight issues was what made them, what they are and what their careers were and how amazing they are. And I also have a quiz for you guys. This is going to be a quick quiz, Ben. You and Karli are going to know the answers to both of these, or all three of these questions, I think. So, Matt, every week we do, well, not every week, but we try to do a quiz now and again. And it's all stuff we've covered on the podcast. Shaun, you probably will know some of these. Matt, if you know any of these, just shout them out. Karli and Ben, you know the rules, I think.
Remind us.
Just type me in the chat, whichever one of you gets it first, and then call it out. You guys kind of have to police yourselves.
Am I in the chat? How do I do
No,
that?
you haven't been using the chat, but you just shout it out because you're a guest.
Okay.
Yeah, and because you're the principal of the Phoenix Symphony, that's a big deal.
That's true.
Yeah. Okay, so here we go. Matt, I use this metronome to make you feel like you're on a game show. Do you feel like you're on a game show?
I do.
They always say that every time. It's great. All right. So first question. From 1915 to 1919, who was the soloist of the xylophone? Sorry. Let me try that again. Soloist of the xylophone. Yeah, I wrote that wrong.
It's going well, Casey.
And just hang on. Okay, here we go. From 1915 to 1919, who was the xylophone soloist in the John Philip Sousa band?
George Hamilton Green.
No.
I know.
Casey Kendall.
Yeah, yeah. I think who got it first there, Ben?
Yeah, it's Joe
Ben
Green.
did.
Oh, that's a good job. Yeah, it's George, one of the Green brothers. Yeah, it's Joe Green. Yep. And we talked about this. Ben reported on Shaun Tilburg's episode. So Shaun, I don't know why you don't remember from 4 years ago, but that's
Yeah. I
I was thinking we talked about it.
205 previous episodes.
right.
We
Yeah.
did about it recently also on the when
Yeah.
we talked
I
about the
think
new music band.
It
Ben
came up again for
Anderson's
some reason.
episode. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it came up. It came up recently. That's why I thought to jot it down. But okay, next question. Okay, past guest and percussionist Stuart Gerber described to us his experience working with composer Karli Stonghausen on the piece Heaven's Door. This piece requires a custom-built ceiling 12-panel double door, ceiling high double door, excuse me, extensive practice and memorization, acting, special shoes, hidden gongs, cymbals, and approximately an 8-year-old what? I think Karli got it.
Child.
Well, can you be more specific? You're right.
Does it have to be a girl?
Oh,
It does. Yeah, it's an 8-year-old little girl. Yeah, that's right. So he of course is appeasing the door for what feels like an hour. It's a really long time. It's probably close to an hour. And at the end the door finally opens and he walks through as if he has finally worked his butt off to appease his way and be granted his way into heaven. And then he walks behind the door, hidden on stage behind black curtains, and starts just banging away at lots of cymbals and gongs, and it's this big cacophony. And then this little girl comes skipping along through the door as if, getting into heaven is very, very easy depending on who you are or where you're at in your life or whatever.
You can buy like the pack of heads for Head Talk from Steve Weiss. You buy like the door and the girl as a package for Steve Weiss.
So
Rental.
something I found, the person in Germany who built the door, there's this huge extensive article with the guy and Stu Gerber like building the door and talking about the door, and there's this long description of how it was done. And yeah, we could have gotten into it a lot more with him, but I guess we had just more questions and things, and we didn't talk about it nearly as much as he probably could have. So yeah, Google that, you'll find it. It's really, there's a lot there. Okay.
Did he talk about Dear Christ?
Did he? I don't remember. I don't think so.
About what?
Dear Christ is the name of the trio that I started in graduate school with Doug Perkins and Stu Gerber.
So I thought we would end the episode with that because Doug Perkins did ask about it. He never asked questions, and then he's like, "Hey, will you guys take this opportunity to talk about something I did?" But I have one more question, and then I want to ask Doug's question. So last question. This world famous avant-garde composer did their master's thesis on Ben's favorite piece, the Bartók Sonata for 2 pianos and 2 percussion. Who is this composer? Oh, nobody.
I think we need a hint.
Oh, a hint.
Wait,
okay.
Matt said something, but I talked over him.
I said Frank Zappa.
That's a good guess. So hint, this is going to make it go really quick. They died the same day Dave Brubeck died.
Mozart! I presume that would be Karl Heinz?
Yeah, that's right. Stockhausen did his dissertation on his master's thesis on so not like a full-blown dissertation. I don't think you can find it. I could not find it. I looked for it, but
it's probably in German anyway.
Yeah, sure, but I thought it's got to be floating around somewhere for us all to see, and I'm sure it is, but I couldn't find it. But yeah, Stockhausen did a thesis on Bartók Sonata.
That would probably be pretty interesting.
Yeah, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Ben, do you think he talks about tricks to turn the snares off and on?
Maybe he put something in there about how to rig up a hi-hat stand to turn the snares on and off.
Probably a whole chapter.
It's probably, yeah.
What else is there to talk about in that piece?
Whole section. Ben does like talking about that. Okay, so nice job. That's your quiz for the day and your history for the day. And yeah, I think it'd be great to finish up with our friend Doug Perkins asked a question about this trio that I guess he and Stu Gerber and Matt McClung had. So what was up with that, Matt?
Okay, so this story comes up when I talk to students, when I talk to a room full of percussionists about how to build a career. Again, as I said, my career is not really built or structured in any way, but basically what happened was my godmother is a music director at my hometown church, and at some point I was a master's student, and she asked me, she said, we put on concerts here, and if you'd like to put on a percussion concert, you would be welcome to do so. I can pay you almost no money, and you would have to drive 6 hours from Cincinnati to get here with all of the equipment because we have none, and put on a full-length concert. And I think we probably got paid like $125. So I went. I had never organized anything like this, but I went to the two best percussionists I knew at school at that time at the Cincinnati Conservatory, who were also my friends, Doug Perkins, who would have been an undergrad at that point, and Stu Gerber. And I thought they would shoot me down, to be honest, but I said, would you guys want to learn like 75 minutes of trio rep and then drive it to a little town in Illinois and play at my godmother's church?
Wow.
$125, not each.
To
total.
split. Yeah.
And they both were like, yeah, we want to do that.
Jeez.
I was completely shocked. And so
That's cool.
I think a lot of people that came through that program because of the percussion group Cincinnati, anybody who went to CCM since 1982 or whenever they started there, I think a lot of trios have kind of started up in that vein because you're there and the people you study from and worship from afar are a percussion trio, and there's all this rep, this fantastic rep. So we did what you think we did. We did Lift Off, and we did table music, and we did some
Stu Bernick.
we didn't do Stu Bernick.
What?
We did some arrangements of Mexican folk songs, 3 people on 1 marimba, which I've used many times to this day. And actually bringing it back to Richard Brown, I brought some of that trio rep with me when I went to Rice as a doctoral student. And we did the Mexican.
I played some of those Mexican marimba pieces.
3 people on 1 marimba. I think we did 6 people on 2 marimbas, but the best story of that was that we learned these pieces, and Richard Brown comes into rehearsal one day, and he's like, I got it. I know what we're going to do. I've got a friend, and they have a bunch of comically huge, like this tall, sombreros, and they have glue on big droopy mustaches.
This wouldn't fly anymore.
This would not fly anymore. And it barely flew at the time. This would have been like the year 2001 or something.
Yeah.
And everybody was just stunned. There are very few moments in my life where I think like I made a real difference, in the sense that if I'm not playing triangle on Daphnis and Chloe, somebody else would be playing triangle on Daphnis and Chloe, and it'd be great.
Did they think you guys were like social activists or?
Oh my. Social anti-activists, I think.
Right.
But I raised my hand. I was like, I think this is a great idea. We're doing it.
Yeah.
And we're going to do it with enthusiasm. And we did it. And the thing that was great about it, honestly, was a lot of the like maintenance crews and, just sort of other helper staffs around Rice University are, people from Mexico or other Latin American countries. That's who, a lot of these sort of people that are unseen, but always around, that they're from Mexico, and they heard us playing these traditional Mexican songs. And sometimes we'd be rehearsing, we look up in the window of that studio door, and they'd be like looking in the window, which I assure you they were not doing for Raintree. And
sure.
They came to the concert. They came to what I'm sure was their first and last percussion ensemble concert, and they thought it was hilarious and hysterical. And think about it, if you went like to Japan and there were a bunch of people dressed like cowboys because they were doing, there was some concert where they decided to represent country music in some way, and they came out with spurs and cowboy hats, I would be amused,
right,
and not offended.
Yeah, well, that's what.
Again, it's not something I would do today. We would flush those mustaches straight down the toilet, and it would be considered. But at the time, there were people in the audience who were like, I can't believe they. But there were a ton of people who had never come to a concert like that before.
Yeah.
It was raucous and amazing. So that was the life that this little group of Mexican folk songs had. I was very proud that they were eventually performed at Rice University with sombreros and mustaches.
Hey, Matt and Shaun,
No pictures.
did you ever have the experience like you're walking to the percussion studio at Rice and you've got, like something fresh straight out of Steve Weiss, it's clean and it's came right off the printer, it's an assignment or something, and Mr. Brown, like, he's in there and he goes, "What do you got there? Give me that." And he just kind of grabs it and like looks at it and kind of, "Oh, well, what is this?" Oh, and he gives it back to you and it's all wrinkled and has like a mustard stain on it. And he didn't
Ranch.
yeah, it's like brown for some reason, and it's got ranch dressing on it, and he didn't even really look at it. He just kind of went like, what do you got there? Give me that."
Yeah. No, he just wanted to grab it.
Yeah.
That happened like a lot.
There was so much food in that studio, and
Right.
like I remember him one time telling, he's like, "All right, everybody, we got mice. There's mice in this. We got to food." And at the end of that little 1-minute speech, he had a bag of chips from
Texadelphia. Yeah.
And he put it down, and then we just had our class. And later that night, I went back into practice, and that thing was covered in ants.
Yeah.
Yeah. That was.
I remember we got stuck. You guys go to Katz's Deli?
Yeah.
I'm sure.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Oh man, so good. But we got stuck there once, Mr. Brown and a bunch of us, and it was just so much fun. And the streets flooded. It rains like crazy there and all that. But man, the streets were flooded. Nobody could go to their cars, and we just had to stay at Katz's for, I don't know, 4 hours or something, and just eat excellent food and talk about music, and yeah, good times. Anyway, it's been great having Matt McClung on. Thanks so much, Matt. And Ben had to run. Shaun, thanks for joining. And Karli, great to see you as always. So, hey, thanks everybody. We'll catch you on 207 next, I think.
Sounds good. Thanks, guys.
Yeah, thanks all.
Bye.
Bye.